What if I told you that intelligence isn't something you're born with? It's something you become, that the sharpness of your mind isn't carved by the genetics you inherit, but by the choices you repeat, that there is no fixed ceiling to your insight, no pre-written script that defines your ability to think, to feel, to understand the layers beneath the surface of this world. Imagine for a moment that the mind is less a vessel to be filled and more a flame to be kindled, a slow, persistent burn that only deepens when you feed it, not with noise, not with shallow facts, but with reflection, with tension, with the kind of questions that disturb your comfort. What if the boundary between who you are and who you could be is nothing more than the depth of your curiosity and the honesty of your self-examination? Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So I ask you, what colors have you been soaking in? When was the last time you questioned the rhythm of your day, not the tasks, not the appointments, but the way your mind moves through the hours, the assumptions you carry, without testing the beliefs you inherited, without consent? When was the last time you sat in stillness and asked yourself, what am I not seeing? Who am I beneath the layers of opinion, habit, reaction? Carl Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, yet how many of us even see ourselves at all beneath the ego, beneath the curated identities, beneath the reflexes that we mistake for personality? There is a deeper current, a silent river that runs through the psyche, and it is there in those still waters that true intelligence waits, not the kind that impresses in conversation, but the kind that understands without needing to speak. Imagine the mind like a forest, each thought a path. Some paths are well-worn, easy, familiar, but they lead to the same clearings, the same predictable views. Growth requires stepping off those paths into the underbrush that tangled me. SS of not knowing, of being wrong, of questioning the very ground you stand on. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Yet without examining our imagination, without probing the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we can do, we become prisoners of a cage we never see the door to. When you hear a new idea, do you sit with it? Do you let it challenge you, or do you collect it like a shiny stone to display without ever feeling its weight? How many books have you read that you never lived? How many quotes have you shared that you never embodied? The Stoics didn't read to impress, they read to transform. They read with the hunger of someone trying to save themselves from their own blindness. What are you really chasing when you seek knowledge? Is it clarity, or is it decoration? Do you seek to be wise, or just to appear clever? There is a sacred discomfort in admitting you don't know, in being the student again, in fumbling through a new skill, through a difficult text, through a worldview that contradicts your own. But in that fumbling, your mind sharpens, not because you have the answers, but because you've made yourself available to them. Intelligence isn't speed, it isn't the quickness of reply or the breadth of your vocabulary. It's the patience to hold opposing ideas in your mind without needing immediate resolution. It's the discipline to listen longer than you speak, to observe before you interpret, to ask before you assume. Plato said the unexamined life is not worth living, but an examined life is not a life of certainty. It is a life of questions, of continuous friction between the self you are and the self you are becoming. What are the thoughts you entertain when no one is watching? What is the dialogue you have with yourself when you fail, when you are rejected, when you are alone? Because those are the thoughts that shape you, those are the colors that dye your soul. If your inner voice is harsh, critical, dismissive, your mind becomes a battlefield where every new idea is shot down before it has the chance to grow. But if your inner voice is curious, kind, challenging, without contempt, then your mind becomes a garden where even discomfort blooms into understanding. Ask yourself, what is my relationship with discomfort? Do I seek it, or do I avoid it? When was the last time I learned something, not because it was useful, not because it was profitable, but because it stretched me, because it made me feel small in the best way? When was the last time I sat with a perspective that made me uncomfortable, and instead of arguing, I asked myself, what part of me feels threatened by this? Why does this sting? Why does this feel wrong? Is it truly wrong, or is it just unfamiliar? Intelligence lives in those questions, in the willingness to be reshaped, to be wrong, to begin again and again, not because you are weak, but because you are devoted to the truth. And the truth does not cater to your pride. The Stoics spoke of living according to nature, but nature itself is not static. It grows, it decays, it renews, it evolves. To live according to nature is to accept that you too are meant to evolve, to shed old skins, to outgrow outdated narratives, to move not just forward but inward, because the deepest journey you will ever take is not across oceans or mountains, but into yourself, into the labyrinth of your own mind, where the minotaur of your fears waits not to devour you, but to reveal you the parts of you you've locked away, the truths you've been afraid to speak even to yourself. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How many of your choices have been dictated by a script you didn't write how many of your limitations are inherited beliefs disguised as personal truth. Intelligence is not just learning, it is unlearning, it is the excavation of the self, it is digging through the layers of conditioning, culture, trauma, ego, until you find the bedrock of who you are, and then asking even then, is this truly me, or is there more, is there deeper? Imagine walking into a room not with the need to impress, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are always learning. Imagine the presence of a person who doesn't need to prove anything because they are too busy observing, too busy understanding the gravity of stillness, the power of silent influence, where your very presence shifts the air, not because you are loud, but because you are present, fully awake, fully engaged. When was the last time you entered a space like that, not seeking to be heard, but seeking to hear, to see, to feel beyond the surface? What if the sharpest mind isn't the one that knows the most, but the one that notices the most? And what would it feel like to become that person, the one who notices the patterns others miss, who hears the hesitation beneath the words, who sees the fear behind the pride, who senses the sacred tension between who someone is and who they could become? Because to see that in others, you must first see it in yourself. You must become intimate with your own contradictions, with your own shadow. Carl Jung called it the shadow for a reason, not because it is evil, but because it is unseen, unacknowledged, unintegrated, and every part of yourself you refuse to face becomes a blind spot in your thinking, a limitation on your intelligence. True intelligence isn't about superiority, it's about integration. It's about holding your light and your shadow together without shame, without fragmentation, because the mind that can embrace its own complexity without running from it becomes a mind capable of understanding the complexity of the world. The mind that can sit with its own pain without numbing, without denying, becomes a mind capable of sitting with the pain of others without judgment. And isn't that the deepest intelligence of all? Not the ability to know facts, but the capacity to know souls, starting with your own. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances. Action, what stands in the way, becomes the way." But most people see obstacles as insults to their intelligence, not as invitations to deepen it. When was the last time you sat with a problem not to worry it, but to understand it, to let it teach you about your own limits, about your own rigidity? Because the mind that grows is the mind that bends, that flexes, that allows itself to be reshaped by the very things it resists. Intelligence is not a fixed point. It is a river. It carves its path not by force but by persistence, by patience, by presence. Presence is the most underrated form of intelligence, because presence requires the discipline to be where you are fully, to engage with what is without the filter of what you want it to be. When you are present, you listen not just with your ears but with your entire being. You see not just the surface but the undercurrent. You feel the weight of a moment, not in the rush to move past it but in the willingness to be shaped by it. Imagine living like that, moving through the world with a mind like water, adapting but never losing its essence, reflecting but never absorbing noise, flowing but always finding its depth. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom," but knowing yourself is not an arrival. It is a practice, a daily choice to observe yourself with clarity, without indulgence, without cruelty, to ask, what did I miss today? Where did my ego speak louder than my curiosity? Where did I choose comfort over growth? Where did I perform instead of participate? These questions are not punishments. They are portals. They are the keys to a mind that stays sharp, not by being certain, but by being alive. Because intelligence isn't static, it's alive. It breathes, it evolves, it questions itself constantly. And the day you stop questioning is the day your mind begins to ossify, to become brittle, to become incapable of meeting the world as it is, rather than as you wish it to be. The Stoics knew this. They didn't seek to control the world. They sought to understand their place within it, to align with the flow of nature, not by resignation but by wisdom, because wisdom is knowing what is within your control and surrendering what is not. And in that surrender there is a paradoxical strength, the strength to not know, the strength to be wrong, the strength to begin again, because in the end the sharpest minds, the deepest souls, the most unforgettable presences are not those who know everything, but those who never stop learning, who never stop listening, who never stop observing the world and themselves with the wonder of a beginner, the humility of a student, the presence of a master. So I ask you again, what are you feeding your mind? What colors are you letting dye your soul? What questions are you brave enough to ask yourself when no one is watching? Because in those questions, in that stillness, in that sacred discomfort lies your true intelligence, and in a world of noise, presence becomes unforgettable.